Le patrimoine immatériel désigne un ensemble de choses. Désigne les arts du spectacle, désigne les pratiques sociales, les rituels, les événements festifs, mais aussi les savoirs, les savoir-faire culturels. Trois choses peuvent se dégager de la notion de patrimoine immatériel, selon la Convention de 2003 sur le patrimoine immatériel, et que le patrimoine immatériel, tout d'abord, est le patrimoine des peuples, donc le patrimoine des communautés locales, autochtones et des groupes. Le patrimoine immatériel aussi est un patrimoine vivant, donc qui évolue et qui va s'adapter aux changements sociaux, économiques, culturels. Et le patrimoine immatériel est non seulement des pratiques héritées du passé, mais peuvent aussi désigner des savoirs contemporains à partir du moment où elles sont propres à des groupes culturels. Donc préserver en fait le patrimoine immatériel, préserver la culture des communautés, qu'elles soient locales ou autochtones, est fondamental en ce sens que à travers une expression culturelle se retrouve l'identité culturelle, l'identité sociale de toute une communauté.
Storytelling connects us to our past. It also makes it possible for us to see a future for ourselves. Really, stories is all that we have, you know, because we need stories to heal ourselves. We need stories to know the essence of who we are as a people. The human race has been sustained by stories because stories have been in existence from as far as human beings have been around. This is how we've been able to share knowledge, we've been able to share ways of knowing about ourselves, about our cultures, our past. Where do we start from? Where do our ancestors come from? And in almost every culture has a story or a myth, a mythology about how they came to be. And it's stories that have helped us maintain that knowledge of who we are.
La Convention sur le patrimoine immatériel a été adoptée par la Conférence générale de l'UNESCO en 2003 et est rentrée en vigueur 3 ans plus tard, donc en 2006. L'objectif de la Convention sur le patrimoine immatériel est d'assurer la sauvegarde de ce patrimoine-là et non pas la protection qui a été garantie plus de 30 ans avant avec la Convention de 1972 sur le patrimoine mondial. Donc, ce qui est important de retenir dans le contenu de la Convention est que l'objectif ultime ici est d'assurer la viabilité du patrimoine et préserver celui-ci de manière vivante et non pas de le voir comme une notion figée et muséifiée. Les communautés sont au centre de ce texte, si bien que sans l'avis de celle-ci, un État ne pourra inscrire un élément sur le patrimoine immatériel, sur une des listes du patrimoine immatériel, par exemple.
I like to tell the story of amongst the Quiche Mayans in Guatemala. They tell the story of how they came into being. This is part of their mythology. So they talk about the twin gods of Tepeu and Gokumatsi. You know, Gokumatsi and Tepeu were living by themselves and they thought, you know, we want to create a world around us. So they created hills and mountains and valleys. Finally, they saw this grandmother, not a human being, you know, she was an otherworldly being. And she had a stone and she was grinding something. They didn't know what it was, but when they looked, there were various colors there. And when they looked closely, they still didn't know what it was. So they asked the great-grandmother, "What is that?" And she said, "Oh, this is corn, this is maize." "Oh, and all the different colors, you know what? Can we have some of this?" And she said, "Oh, by all means." It's all about sharing. So Tepeu and Gukumatsi took the corn and they made it into various shades that we see the Quiche people today. And the Quiche people, they could speak, they could sing, so when they asked them to pay tribute and show their appreciation for Tepeu and Gukumatsi, they sang, they played music, you know, shakers. And so when you think about that story, how the Quiche came into being, for me now, I am thinking part of their appreciation for being created is sharing the many uses of corn not only the many uses of corn, but how to cultivate and grow corn. That's what storytelling is for me today. It's a story that is from the past, but it's happening today, and we are developing new ways of taking these stories forward for ourselves.
La Convention, en fait, ne va pas forcer les États à prendre des mesures visant la sauvegarde de leur patrimoine, mais elle les encourage, elle les invite, elle les guide à prendre des actions, finalement. C'est pour cette raison qu'on pourrait dire que la Convention a une portée très large, car chaque État va l'interpréter en fonction de ses dispositions, en fonction de ses organisations en place et de son pouvoir au niveau local et national.
Being a storyteller today means having the flexibility to tell stories about the present, but also to be able to move to the past. Because when I tell stories, my idea is to share with people the fact that there are those that came before us. If it wasn't for them, we would not be here. So whatever good they did, we benefit from it. Whatever bad they did, it affects us as well. But we are our stories, you know, and so by knowing our stories from the past, for better or for worse, I think it makes us better people because we know what works, what doesn't work, and that way we are able to construct a better future for ourselves.
Préserver le patrimoine immatériel aussi, c'est contribuer au développement durable des communautés, car assurer sa sauvegarde répond aux objectifs économiques, environnementaux et sociaux.
And in this particular story, it's about a king that essentially he wakes up in a bad mood, and as we know, kings have ultimate power. They can do whatever they want. So on this one day, the king wakes up and he decides he wants all the storytellers to come around and tell him a story that has no end. So different storytellers come around and they tell their stories, and each one of them tells a story that eventually comes to an end, and so they meet with different kinds of fate. Until finally it's the turn of my great grandfather, Mliakwana, who tells a story about a young man. And he starts his story by saying, "Oh, great King Sumbama, long time ago at the beginning of the time of our ancestors, there was a young man who by the name of Jehudi. But one day it just happened that a bird was flying by, you know. And this bird was minding its own business. All of a sudden, it noticed some grain, a little hole in the storage space where Jehudi kept his grain, and so the bird came, picked a grain of millet and flew away. All of a sudden, another bird came, picked a grain of millet and flew away. Another bird came, picked a grain of millet and flew away. And great King Sumbama was so angry, so he said to my great grandfather, Mliakwana, "We know a bird picked a grain of millet and flew away, but what happened next?" And my great grandfather said, "Oh, great King Sumbama, after that, another bird came, picked a grain of millet and flew away." So finally, so fed up was the king that he said, okay. You win. Your story truly has no end. I like this story because it's got so many lessons in it. We could talk about continuity, we could talk about resistance in the sense that why is the king punishing the people this way? And that's my grandfather's, my great ancestors' way of resisting that. But also it could be about resilience. You know, you have to find a way to survive. It's about survival. So that's why this is one of my favorite stories.
La Convention sur le patrimoine immatériel de 2003 porte l'emphase sur les traditions, les pratiques proprement culturelles. sans que presque aucun intérêt soit porté aux espaces naturels. Pourtant, quand on regarde certaines pratiques, certaines connaissances qui sont en lien avec la nature, l'espace naturel abrite ces pratiques, si bien que sans une reconnaissance, sans une préservation de ces espaces naturels, ces pratiques ne peuvent exister.
I would like to say to the future generation of storytellers, tell your stories. Tell your stories. Tell your stories in a way that the stories reflect the diversity of the people that we are. We live in a world that's so diverse today in terms of religion, people's cultures, backgrounds, especially when you live in a place like Canada, where you have people coming from all different countries, and each one of them brings something about themselves, a little something from wherever they came from. If we heard their stories, we'll get to understand who are our neighbors, who are our friends. You know, what is it about the places where they come from that makes them similar to ourselves rather than different? But especially, I think we need to tell our stories so that we change this colonial and neo-colonial narrative that has been in existence for a long time. Because for one, it's a hegemonic story that has been told for so long that puts Europe in the center. And by putting Europe in the center of knowledge and the universe, it relegates and marginalizes the knowledges that come from other cultures. All indigenous cultures are pushed to the background because Europe is the place of knowing. All knowledge comes from Europe. So we need to tell our stories in a way that changes that, you know, to reflect the essence of the people that we are, to reflect the fact that all of us, all our cultures have contributed to making the world what it is.